Great. Well, once again, welcome. You are in for a treat today. We are going to discuss some topics that you probably experience in your workplace regularly, and they are probably quite frustrating. But today we are going to really look at them through a lens that is not done often. So I hope you will find it helpful. So today we are going to really dive into common dilemmas of vegans who work in corporate jobs. And it includes themes such as this. How the event will go, I will spend the first 15 or 20 minutes, and I will go through these 7 big dilemmas one by one. And for each of them, I would like to share with you some tips and even show you examples of how you would tackle these dilemmas through like a real life activity. After that, we are going to break out into smaller groups. And what I would like to do is for all of us to repeat one of these activities and do it for our own situation. So that should be fun. And I think all of us then can meet each other and make some connections. After that, we are going to have Stephanie Lynch from Greener by Default. She works for an organization that really specializes in perfecting these kind of plant-based switch strategies in the workplace. So we should be able to hear some really good tips and like really practical guides. She's going to speak for about 20 minutes. And then we are again going to form little live interactive groups and just do a recap. Like, what do you like best? What you learned that is useful? And if you want, you could even do like a very light practice of a pitch you might want to do in a workplace for some vegan idea. So with that, can you please just confirm you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. Well, let's jump in. I want to start with this dilemma because to me, this dilemma is special. And it's basically one that speaks to vegans who don't see themselves as activists in the workplace, which by the way is totally okay. So this is maybe for somebody who would like to see vegan advancements in the workplace, but without them putting their own job or professional relationships on the line. Now, this is still common, especially in companies that are not particularly vegan friendly. And if you are the ones with this dilemma, let me just say a couple things. The first one is, if this is just not what makes sense for you to actively promote veganism in your workplace, then do not. Because frankly, if you are a vegan who works in a corporate job, presumably well-paid job, there are more potent ways in which you can help the movement, which frankly are probably going to be more useful to the movement than another person being an activist in a workplace. So these are some of the common alternative ways to help the movement. The first one should be obvious, but in my experience, actually, a lot of vegans who work in lucrative jobs do not donate to their full potential to the movement. I think kind of a good, comfortable rule of thumb should be 5% of your salary. So if you are making, let's say, $100,000 in salary, you should be able to very comfortably donate $5,000 every year without even noticing. And you can donate those money to any of the many organizations that are working in a vegan space, either close to corporate, like VLCM, Greener by Default, Veganuary, or many other organizations, sanctuaries, or other places, Mercy for Animals and such, that do this work. So that's the way that you can frankly buy yourself out of this dilemma completely and frankly not worry about being a completely silent vegan. But there are other ways that also make sense for people like you who are working corporate jobs and probably make good money. There are many vegan restaurants or specialty vegan products that are pricey for many people, and those products really have to have a chance to succeed. So I consider myself in this category. I often splurge on very expensive vegan products because I want them to succeed, especially when they are in that early adopter stage. I also, to be honest, probably spend more than I should going to fancy restaurants that have vegan options because I feel that's very important for those places to stay in business. And I like to introduce those places to non-vegans from work, because every time I bring somebody in, that becomes a potential customer. I think, frankly, that's just as valuable as pushing for vegan movement in the workplace. And this third piece is, so this is a little different from being a vegan activist in a workplace. This is more like normalizing the vegan identity at work, being somebody that people know is vegan, but is also highly admired, extremely popular person, so that people get to associate vegan identity with something that they really admire. So frankly, big takeaway is, if you really don't want to do some of the things we're going to talk about later today, do not, but then please do try to lean into some of these other areas. That said, I know so many people who have very high positions in corporations who are vegan, and they are just not comfortable talking about veganism in the workplace, which is fine. But I would like everybody to at least learn to pick up on super easy opportunities that sometimes really fall in your lap, and they just need somebody to ask for something. No sales push is needed. And to me, this is the sweet spot, because I feel like there are so many opportunities in corporate workplaces that go untapped because people are just sort of afraid, or they haven't built that sixth sense to act on them. So I hope as we go through this presentation, you will get more comfortable with recognizing some of these, frankly, gimme opportunities. And let's move on to the second dilemma. Now, this is a different one. This is for people who do want to actively be a voice for the plant-based movement in the office. And their dilemma is, well, I would love to do it, but my employer is very specifically against any kind of personal activism at work. So what do we do with this? First, a couple months ago, we actually had a dedicated webinar that was all about how to pitch a vegan idea in the workplace. So we took it from different angles, talked about situations like messages. So if you didn't attend that webinar, as long as you are registered today, we are going to share some of those materials with you after this event. So that should help reiterate some of that knowledge about how to successfully and savvily talk about vegan ideas in a workplace. Now, this is to me very important. Instead of doing something that is just very foreign to your office or your company, it's best to go for something that is already something similar to what company is doing. I'm going to actually do an activity with you and actually show you a specific example of this for my company, which is CBRE. I think really the strategy here is, there are probably some people in the office who are sending newsletters or organizing events, the social concierge or the experience team. It is a good idea to simply become friends with them. And when you are just chatting with them, ask them casually, like, hey, what would it take for us to actually have plant-based catering for the next plant-based events? So literally, to me, this is the line that is incredibly effective, because you are not pushing, you are simply asking. And that person often will say, oh, that's kind of a neat idea. We haven't done it, but why not? And then you can start talking about the how. It's also quite important that if you are asking for any kind of vegan ideas in the workplace, they should always be positioned as something that is relevant and interesting to all the employees, rather than let's just do this for the vegans. And it should always feel like these are fun, positive expansions of experiences, rather than taking something away. And there should never be this kind of like guilt trip angle. So now let's actually do the activity. And I actually did this as my own homework when I was preparing for this webinar. I actually wanted to think through 3 easy ideas that would be really doable to implement in office where I work. So I just gave it some thought and came up with actually 4 ideas very easily. Number 1 is this. Our office does monthly newsletter, and every month they feature these all kinds of like sort of fringe or, like very kind of specialized days. So this is already being done. So frankly, it is not much of a stretch to suggest next November, because I missed the boat this year, to incorporate the World Vegan Day. It honestly fits. And if I were to do it, I just need to chat with the person who sends out the newsletter. I'm not friends with that person yet, but I know her. And I should make sure to say, well, the World Vegan Day should be very relevant because we have so many Indian vegetarian employees. And by the way, these are some other VPs who would really like to see that. So all I have to do is just to suggest. Frankly, if the person says, I don't know, we don't want to do it, no harm done. You still planted the seed. Second idea is, to be honest, I often organize team building events or buy food, and sometimes I do not go for vegan catering because I feel like, that's kind of pushing my own agenda. But there must be team building event where I can simply say, well, I'm paying for it, so let me actually choose the catering. Now, it has to be something attractive. Non-vegans don't necessarily love vegan food. I mean, that's just a fact. So I would have to think hard to go for something that is already comfortable for people, either some Italian or Mexican. And I would have to come up with a company. But to me, this is easy. I can't believe that I haven't really done this more. Number 3 is something that I've been meaning to do for several years. And I'm now promising to all of you to actually do it now, which is to simply create a plant-based group for employees at our company. I already know at least 20 vegans, and I've just been slow to get it done. Our company provides Microsoft Engage platform where anybody can create interest groups. So there's really no excuse not to do this. And I don't need any kind of permission, or I don't need to convince anyone. Idea number 4 is, I just want to show you an example that you can really insert this through many angles. Our company every November does a big employee volunteering challenge where you can submit your, where you volunteered, and then they can match it or they feature it. I have been doing this in the past, and with so much pride, I would submit my vegan leaders volunteering. It never got picked, even though I volunteer insane number of hours all the time. So I just need to maybe come up with something catchier. Maybe with more preparation, I can come up with some really cool local, animal sanctuary events that employees could be genuinely interested in. Or if I'm going to do it, clearly my prior strategy wasn't catching on. So I just need to think of ways to do it in a way that maybe will get noticed more. But I hope this was helpful. And when we do our breakout, I would like for each of you to come up with one idea in your workplace like this. Think about what your office is already regularly doing. So now let's talk about dilemma number 3. To me, this is so easy, but it can be tempting to think that the focus right now is on so many other hot issues that, nobody's really gonna care about the vegan cause. Well, honestly, that can be kind of a good thing, because to be honest, vegan eating is something that is really an everyday topic that fits with whatever else people might be passionate about. And I think by us making this an everyday topic rather than this sort of special wave, that's where we want to actually get. So how you kind of bring the plant-based issue ever present is just continuously make it visible in the workplace. Always bring vegan snacks. If your cafeteria allows feedback form, do it. And remind people, I love the plant-based options that we have, or I am sad to see that we stopped having so many plant-based options. Just keep the issue always alive. And frankly, over time, it really makes the issue normalized. And every time when you have some kind of team building activity and you are supposed to share a fun fact, do say you are vegan, but say it kind of in a fun way, I love vegan cooking, or I'm my favorite thing to do is going to plant-based conferences, in a way that frankly just intrigues other people. Perfect. So moving on to dilemma number 4. This is to me a dilemma that maybe is not so real. Many of us are vegans for the animals. And that's why we feel bummed when the animal issue just gets pushed out of the conversation. And that absolutely seems to be the case, that people are now talking so much about the plant-based and health and whatever, green diet, but it just seems sort of whitewashed. So how do we kind of bring the focus back on the animals? I actually consulted on this topic with some experts, including at the recent Reducitarian Summit, which was a couple of weeks ago in Dallas. And every single person said this, and these are professionals. Sorry. don't force this issue. If the health angle or environmental angle are working, don't get in the way. And really, really keep in mind that for most people, the animals just don't do it. They get, frankly, much more riled up about the other angles. And that's just how it is. And instead of us wishing they cared about the animals, I think we should really focus on the messages that actually work. Also, this is something I learned the hard way, frankly. Bringing some brochures or videos to work that can upset people, it can do more harm than good. Stuff like this is good if you really want to get public riled up. But I would say at work, it just probably will backfire. Now, if you do need to talk about the animals, do try to kind of relate to people in a way that will connect, such as talking about how they may love their dog. And this final one, this might feel like little kind of out there, but I find that many mainstream media are doing this work so well for us. So instead of me trying to be the spokesperson in the workplace, I simply like to recommend either articles or just subscription like New York Times. Because I feel like, and let me show you some examples, New York Times is something that continuously drips plant-based content, but without it feeling like righteous activism. So here are just a couple examples of New York Times content recently, and I just wanted to show you a couple different angles. New York Times always publishes featured recipes, and frankly, more often than not, 50% or more of them are vegetarian or vegan. To me, this is huge. This is not something to underestimate because it will normalize this idea with readers who are extremely influential. A couple months ago, there was actually an article about the plant-based treaty. Now, this is maybe not something that many people would click on if they are not already interested, but because it is written in kind of intriguing way, this is the way to really bring the topic into the conversation by excellent journalists. To me, this is a great example. This was just in New York Times last week. And it is actually something that very indirectly talks about suffering of farm animals, but it positions it as this sort of juicy, scandalous story. I bet many people who are not animal rights activists clicked on it. And then sort of as they were reading, they probably picked up on this topic without realizing it. If this article was titled, "Stop Animal Cruelty, Go Vegan," people would be rolling their eyes and not clicking on it. So what I'm trying to say here is, if there are some media or sources that are very mainstream and would probably have appeal to people at work, recommend those to them and let these professional media do the work instead of you forcing yourself to do it. So we have a couple more dilemmas, and actually, as we get through the end, the last few of them are actually going to be addressed by Stephanie. But this is one I really am fascinated by. So many of our employers are gung-ho about all of these corporate responsibility topics. They talk so much about them, but whenever you try to introduce any kind of plant-based angle, they say no. So what do we do here? I think this really goes to the issue of normalizing the plant-based idea in general. Now, generally speaking, more and more companies should be getting on board with the plant-based angle under all these programs gradually. But if your company is not there yet, just don't worry, help pave the way. And just basically just assume that, the company just hasn't reached that readiness.
Serena, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt for a second. I think there are people waiting to be let in.
Oh, okay. Please let them in. Thank you, Michael. Great. And I think one of them is our second speaker, Stephanie, so perfect. Okay, so just a couple more points to cover here. Do get good at talking about the plant-based ideas in a way that is appealing to the other person. Now, this is a skill that gets easier the more you practice. I have seen so many vegans who frankly botch this, because they are so like overzealous and nervous or like awkward when talking about plant-based ideas, or they just don't talk about them at all. So I think we just need to get good at simply incorporating this topic into conversation in a very breezy, pleasant way. So to me, like one great way to say it is just to ask like, hey, why aren't we doing this? Everybody, Paris Olympics are doing it. The Republican National Convention has had vegan barbecue. Like, learn to kind of come up with some like sort of outrageous, unexpected example that will completely sort of shift the thinking for the person you're trying to convince. And then just ask this question and be quiet and let them talk. Usually they will say, you know what, that's a great point. We just probably haven't really considered it. So I would say, do remember this line. And to be honest, this is something that is pretty amazing. Like, I actually don't even have myself a go-to pack of materials to share with people, like something very, very powerful to share with them on the environmental topic. This is actually what we are going to do at VLCM, to put together kind of very corporate-friendly, very sort of like non-vegan tailored recommended set of materials. It needs to be very catchy. It can be just this, boring long thing with tons of statistics. People frankly don't care. It needs to be something that has some sort of provocative headline, like something that will intrigue people enough to want to read it if they don't already care about the topic. Okay, well, I'm I think running a little over time, so let me just go through this very quickly. So when it comes to finding out why the Green Committee or Diversity and Inclusion Committee or whatever wellness committee is staying away from the plant-based angle, ask them by conversation what the specific hang-up is. It often is the case that the plant-based idea simply didn't occur to the organizers. So what you do there is that you just simply need to educate them. And don't feel angry at them for not having been aware that this is even a thing. So sometimes what you have to do is just to simply plant the seed. Now, oftentimes the case is that people are already aware that they could be doing like a plant-based catering, but they are genuinely worried that employees are going to be angry at it. So what you do here is you just need to convince them that that's not likely to happen. So have any kind of, convincing testimonials, articles that show that other companies have done it and employees loved it. So to me, frankly, the Republican National Convention example is great because they actually did apparently vegan barbecue a couple months ago, and it was one of the most popular things, which is totally unexpected. So if your company is worried that people would hate vegan food, your goal here is to convince them that that's not going to be the case. And if they say, oh, we should not tell people what to eat, then kind of jokingly tell them like, well, you are already doing so many other things. You are telling people, having all of these policies for other issues. So why not this? And it's like, well, employees didn't complain when we had a Diwali event last month. How is this any different? Okay, and finally, sometimes the problem is logistical, that simply these people are not really savvy about the plant-based movement, so they have no idea what caterers, restaurants exist, and they think this would just be a nightmare or not possible. So here you just have to very gently kind of tell them, hey, do you know that there is this restaurant that has actually a completely vegan menu and it's delicious? Make sure to not pester them. So sort of find that sweet spot where you just help them, but then leave it to them to feel like they have you're not kind of like on them. And do always make sure to be extremely nice and likable and give them a ton of positive reinforcement. All right, we have just 2 more dilemmas and I'll be very quick about them and then we are going to do our breakout. This is to me very important. Like, many of you are vegan employees, but not necessarily the people who are choosing catering or messaging. And you don't even maybe know who does. So what can you do? Stefan is going to get into this quite a bit in her presentation, but just a couple of food for thoughts. Keep in mind that we're not necessarily just talking about these huge company-wide policy changes. There are always things in which you can help prepare the ground, like what we discussed earlier. And never forget that as an employee, you're always entitled to make a suggestion or state your opinion. But never forget that when it comes to something like, plant-based lifestyle, you can't push it on people. They are not obligated to listen to you, and the only way to get them to listen is to be like extra likable and extra persuasive. We have one more dilemma left, and that is, what happens if your cafeteria actually did roll out some great vegan options, but then stopped them, and the answer is that, well, nobody was buying them. So Steph will also talk about this. In my opinion, this is something that we just notice more, but we probably don't notice that every day meat and dairy dishes probably go through the same fate. So don't take it too personally, and use it as an opportunity to open a dialogue. Oftentimes, frankly, plant-based options in cafeteria come in waves. Do not botch the situation. Don't make an enemy out of the dining director by complaining too much, but maybe let it pass, and then in the next round, do give them feedback that maybe you stopped going to the cafeteria because there are no plant-based options. Okay, so that's all for our first section. And next thing, I'm going to break us out into groups. And what I'd like to do is in each group, just somebody take initiative and go first. And please spend 1.5 minutes per person to just talk a little bit about how these dilemmas or some of these easy win ideas could apply at your companies. So for example, wherever you are working, what is 1, 2, 3 ideas that would fit? And these are some examples. So let me stop sharing and get us into breakouts.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, well, hello, team. There's
Hi.
4 or 5 of us here, which is perfect. Okay, so I think we have fewer people in this group than in the others, but who would like to go first and just introduce yourself and share a little bit about how some of these ideas could work at your company? So I think
Hi.
Pascal, you're ready to go.
Yeah, that's okay. I work for a transport and logistic company close to Paris. I look after the offices in France, so that gives me a little bit of power and ways to actually implement things that are vegan and vegan friendly in the workplace. So that's what I do.
Great. And can you think of one easy idea for you to push?
Well, I've done it many ways, but it depends on what people do. But I've had to buy lunches on a few occasions for colleagues. I don't make it a big thing to where I go to buy stuff, because I believe that we've got vegan food these days that are actually close to any other food. So buying a wrap with a fake chicken might actually not seem like a vegan food to anyone. And I've had great feedback actually on what I purchased, and they had no idea that they were having vegan food. So that's my way of going around things. And yeah, but of course it depends on what you do in the office, right? Not everyone has got that option, that opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, Deep, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deep. Sorry if there's some background noise. I'm just in an office here. My latest role was with a telecom company in Canada, and it was mainly around food as well, the efforts that I tried. I joined a new team, so they wanted to have like a welcome lunch. And Dorina, a little bit of what you were saying was there, like I tried to remove barriers for them of like finding the restaurant and where might there be good food. Because if they let the caterer decide or they rely on the company people, they don't always find the best vegan food, and you almost do more harm than good because they come with this terrible meal and people say, I don't want to try that again. So sometimes it'll be that, but they don't always want vegan food. So there's sometimes this mixed meal and you just let them order what they want. And then sometimes if I'm ordering just for myself and everyone's ordering their own food, if I know it's going to be good and there's someone who might have traveled there or someone who orders in at other times, I'll order extra on purpose and I'll just have leftovers because they'll often look at my meal and be like, where did you get that? I wish I could have some, and I'll have extra on purpose by design to just then offer it and make it look organic. But I try to design that kind of scenario so that they try it, and then maybe the next time they'll order with me and shift their meal.
Great. What do you think is the easiest idea for most vegan employees? What would you recommend that people do if they don't have other preference?
I think it's a matter of like their comfort level on putting themselves out there. If they're willing to sort of speak out, I think it is around food choices, at least like at the starting point. I think of it maybe in three categories. There's food choices in cafeteria and feedback for companies, either through the vendor or surveys. It may be them looking at how they donate, like you sort of touched this at the top of like donating part of your salary. And I think there's just a lot of effective charities out there. And like for me, before I started researching the space, I thought about sanctuaries a lot, dogs and cats, and just that was a lot of what I saw for donation, but I wanted to give to farmed animals. And with research, you can sort of shift your dollars to do a lot of good, even if it's not directly in your day to day. And then beyond that, it might be just more kind of larger group, like a bigger voice. And that's where, it depends on your personality and the network you have in your company. If you have that and you're willing to be more vocal, then there's sort of bigger initiatives you can go after, but that's not for everybody. And I think it's a case by case.
Oh, well said. Let's hear a little bit from Sophia.
Hey, I'm Sophia. I work for a construction company, but in the corporate office. And right now our cafeteria, like it's a concession. And so like the people running the cafeteria couldn't run it anymore. I'm like, oh, like this is a good opportunity, to pitch like having someone come, like a caterer come and run the cafeteria and offer plant-based options. But it's in Mexico, so I feel over there like the culture for plant-based and that aspect like is not very well received. So like I'm trying to figure out, like what to do, how like I maybe could approach like companies or like businesses that have like plant-based options and say like, hey, would you be interested in like doing this, or like how to make sure that, or if they offer the concession to someone else, like there's healthy food and plant-based food offered as part of the options, because I work remote, but when I go to the office, it's like I'm vegan and there's nothing there for me. And I don't know, I also don't know how many plant-based people are there, but I also feel that if their options is out there, maybe there's people willing to try it. So it's kind of this balance of how to make a case if there's not enough demand, but there's no demand because no one has access to it either. So it's kind of this loop.
Yeah, for somebody like you, I would recommend, you are probably in a place that is little, not far along on the adoption curve. So just be patient and maybe focus on helping the movement develop in the overall society, because companies respond to what is happening in general society. So, do make sure to recharge your vegan batteries by, being part of a meetup and going to conference or some like fun festival, and maybe support organizations that you can volunteer with or so. And, just be patient as the company slowly adapts. Great. So I think we all heard from everybody. So let's get back to the main session. And the next up is Greener by Default. It was really lovely to speak with you.
Thank you.
Lovely. We are all returning to the main session. And Steph, if you are up, we are slightly behind schedule, but we are good. So please know you have your 20 minutes now. And hope you can share. Let me know if you are unable to share.
Yeah, I can do a screen share. that work? Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great.
Yep.
I think everyone's back. So I will go ahead and jump in. Hi, my name is Steph. I'm the Corporate Engagement Director for Greener by Default. I think many people on this call are familiar with Greener by Default, so we're not going to dive too deep into who we are today, but suffice it to say we are an institution that empowers other companies and corporations with evidence-based consulting to get people to adopt more plant-based diets. We do that mostly through defaults, and we have a bunch of other strategies that we use. I'll just briefly show them here. This is our general selection of top 7 strategies that we try and incorporate into food service at different companies. And I will be sending a link, or Dorina, I think you're sending a link out with all information about these different strategies if you are unfamiliar with them. But this is essentially the best way for using human behavioral science to get people to eat more plant-based. And often this happens without people doing it. So like I said, we're not going to dive into that too deep today because I want to focus the conversation around how we get people to adopt strategies. Because I know we have a lot of advocates in this room, and it would be great to have you all empowered to be able to make some changes at your companies. So, but a lot of information, happy to connect with anyone if they have any questions about these strategies and diving in deeper. So just want to start out with 2 quick case studies that we have. We've done this with a lot of different institutions, but I think these 2 case examples show a variety of options and a variety of ways that people have been able to adopt our principles and see them successful. So I start with LinkedIn. We did a pilot program a couple of years ago with LinkedIn across 5 different of their campuses. The 2 main strategies that they used were the oat milk default and carbon-friendly ratios, so encouraging more plant-based products to meat products. And the results were massive. We had a 65% plant-based on the menus, and it resulted in 50% less carbon emissions, which is the equivalent of driving 35,000 miles with a gas-powered vehicle. Just from the oat milk default, so by default, we mean keeping oat milk as the option that everyone gets unless if they opt in for dairy milk. Just by doing that one change, by having an oat milk default, we cut the dairy milk from 70% to 18% in the LinkedIn offices. And then one of the big things that we always talk about is this preserves the opportunity for people to make choices about their own food. So it's a really important principle for us that you allow meat or dairy to be able to be selected if people want it. And because of that, we often see no change in diner satisfaction, or in fact, diner satisfaction increases. And we'll talk a little bit about why that might happen in a minute about inclusion. The second case study I just want to give is we've done this at so many different events. Events is a really awesome opportunity for people to test it out and see if it works in a low stakes setting, right? Flipping a corporate cafeteria might be really difficult, might be a little scary for people. So we really love starting with events, having people see the experience in action, and then realizing it's actually not that big of a deal and people are happy that then they can take this on and do it further in your corporate cafeterias or with other places where food is served. So these are just a few of the events that we've done work at. We used a plant-based default RSVP, which again means by default, everyone's getting a plant-based meal. You have to opt in for a meat or dairy-based one. And just by doing that, we had 80 to 96% of people stick with the plant-based meal. And we compared that against, we did specifically this Climate Forward event in New York. We compared it against another event that was also a sustainability crowd that had a meat-based meal. And it went from 4% of people who were opting in for a plant-based meal to 96% of people who stuck with the plant-based meal when they did the plant-based default. So a total flip, total opposite, just by changing one thing in an RSVP form, right? So if you ever get the opportunity to do something like this is the most powerful tool I can give to you. It has massive science backing and is, as you can see, very, very effective. So if you don't have that opportunity, it might look a little harder, right, to figure out where to go, who to talk to. So if you have a corporate cafeteria, if you have events, If you have a cafe on campus, all of these places can be great adopters of some of these principles. And something that Darina said for one of the dilemmas, one of the pitfalls that I do want to reiterate is it's important not to frame this as a vegan or vegetarian issue, right? And we're going to talk a little deeper about what kinds of ways you can get to people and what things they might care about that make a compelling argument. But knowing your audience and knowing what they care about is going to be extremely important. So for us to do that, we have to first figure out who we want to talk to. So unfortunately, it can be a little confusing in a corporate environment. Who is responsible for this, right? A lot of people have their hands in a lot of different places with food service just because it's something that happens every day, right? And it could be a facilities department, it could be an HR department thing, it could be a sustainability team, right? So I made a list of generally the people who I talk to on a regular basis at different corporations. And I think it's also important in perspective of this audience. I know it can be scary to be the lone vegan in a corporate world like this, but you don't have to be. Like, there are so many different allies that you can have at your company and your organization. And this is just a handful of them. So I do want to also highlight one of the easiest entries in if you, for example, don't know your sustainability director or you don't know your food service operations director, who are like kind of the two key people who can make change for you. If you don't know them, you might know someone else who knows them. And something that's very easy is being able to look at like your HR teams, right? Do you have a green team? Do you have a worksite wellness team? Do you have any affinity groups that are religiously based that have some dietary restrictions that might be an advocate or an ally for you to be able to make this kind of change? So start thinking about who you might know that you could talk to. And then some of these might seem like very simple recommendations, but I think it's important to think about it in the context of all the different ways that we can get to people. In the organizing world, it's called power mapping. So how do we talk to people in a way that will get them to hear us, and who do we know that knows someone else? So a warm introduction from another person is the number one way that you can get change and get to someone. So I encourage you to think about, is there someone else who maybe, knows the corporate sustainability director for food service? Or do you know someone who used to work for the restaurant association that is running your food service cafeteria? Those kinds of things. A couple other ways that you can get to them, just emailing them using your org chart and your company database. Very easy. Joining a meeting for a group, any of those HR affinity groups or green teams, scheduling a one-on-one with someone. Just food service directors often will take those meetings from concerned people. So being able to have that kind of a one-on-one is really easy. Greener by Default does these presentations all the time. I love coming to green teams. They're my favorite people to talk to. If you have any lunch and learns at your corporate, in your corporate structures, recommend me. And then finally is a comment campaign. If you left feedback for food service, or if there's an employee end of year, what are those called? The happiness, like your employee engagement surveys, those kinds of things. If there are any of those, be sure to include this as part of the conversation, right? Doesn't start the conversation unless if we start it ourselves. So I would say now let's move on to the business argument for plant-based, right? So like I was saying before, it doesn't work to just say this is a vegan or vegetarian issue. We really have to identify the person who is the yes maker and then figure out what we can say that will get them to yes. So hopefully by now you've identified in your brain, who is the person that I could talk to? So let's start picturing and framing them in your brain. What do they care about? Are they HR, that they care about corporate, that they care about employee happiness, that they care about employee retention? Is it a health and wellness group that cares about health? Is it the sustainability department that cares about sustainability? All of these are different factors that actually make up the argument for having plant-based defaults or pushing more food towards plant-based. So, and there are all sorts of reasons why a company might care about these things. And one of the most important ones we'll talk about is finances, because I think I think we often forget that part of the conversation, and it can be a really powerful one. Oh, and I will say, just to go back real quick, I will say you'll notice that animal advocacy is not on this list. And I think that's one of the things Dorina was talking about earlier too. And it's important, we don't frame it as an animal advocacy issue ever. That message gets lost. That conversation honestly doesn't help. So I would encourage you not to think of it in that context. I know that goes against what we naturally want to do often, but it doesn't work. And science shows that. But what does work, people are expecting meaningful action on climate change, right? 85% of event attendees prefer events with sustainable practices. 70% of employees want their employers to invest in sustainable efforts. And then also 63% of consumers report trying to eat healthier most of the time or all of the time. And it is especially on the rise in Gen Z and younger generations. So as employees are looking for retention and being able to bring in and attract those younger employees, this actually can be a really beneficial tool for that. So I'm going to start with health, because health is I think someone was saying it in my breakout group, like it's important to have a personal connection to this, right? Tell your personal story. And I think health really gets at the heart of this for a lot of people. 50% of people who are adopting a vegan or vegetarian diet are doing it for health reasons. I think we all know someone who has probably been affected by cancer, heart disease, stroke, obesity, or type 2 diabetes. Those are the top 5 leading causes of death. The other thing that ties those 5 things together is that if you eat a meat-based diet, you are more likely to develop all of those diseases. So health can be a very personal one, a very powerful one. I encourage people to use that if that seems right for your audience. The second big issue is the environment, right? And I think we all know a lot about the facts here, but the more and more I dig in, the wilder it is about the impact that animal-based products have on our environment. Suffice it to say, the big picture here, without getting into all the details, is that a bunch of peer-reviewed journals have found if we change every other industry in the United States, so that's building, transportation, everything else becomes net zero, but we leave the food systems exactly as they are, we will still surpass the 1.5 degree Celsius of global warming that we're trying to remain under. So we have to do something about our food systems. It's not a question if or what, we have to do something about our food systems to prevent a climate apocalypse, basically. And the easy thing to also say there is that the carbon footprint of plant-based meals on average is half of that of meat. So this is a very easy switch that you can make. And I will just put this in perspective against some other sustainability interventions. This was from a study from a 100-person meeting. And they found that switching from beef to veggie burgers is by far the best thing that they could do for a sustainable intervention in an event space. Okay, so we're going to switch to our last couple ideas of how to talk about this issue, how to frame up this issue. And for that to happen, also, I wanted to just mention that shareholders and regulators are also an important part of this conversation, right? It's not just about consumers, it's also about the pressure on a company to be able to make their shareholders and their regulators happy. So with California Scope 3 emissions requirements coming down, and seeing it in the UK, we're starting to see a lot more corporations have to report on these kinds of issues. And then secondly, meaningful action on DEI. That's becoming more and more part of the conversation, more built into the structures of corporations. So inclusion and DEI are also being part of this conversation. So we're going to start with that one real quick, because important to be thinking about inclusion of all of our employees, right? And I think some of these facts are pretty mind-boggling for people, but we don't really pay attention to it. We think of them as the outlier instead of being inclusive to begin with. So, for example, 30 to 50 million Americans are actually lactose intolerant. We all know there are many religions that encourage vegetarianism, and there's some restrict certain animal products. Health is something we talked about earlier, but actually more than half of Americans are trying to eat less red meat. And then finally, communities of color. I think this is an important part of the conversation that gets left out a lot. BIPOC communities are nearly 3 times more likely to identify as vegetarian than white Americans are. So all of these inclusive conversations, I think, have a lot of relevance in a lot of different companies. They're not making the connection here between plant-based diets and inclusion. So being able to make that kind of that connection for them could be very beneficial. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is cost savings. So this is actually from a dining hall at a large university on the East Coast. They had one dining hall that was fully vegetarian by default, and they saw this kind of a difference. So you can see their food costs dropped from 31% to 22% when they went plant-based by default. And actually their labor costs dropped by 5% as well. And we do have replicating of this study in different environments. One of the most powerful stats that we have is we worked with the New York City hospital, health and hospital system. We flipped 11 of their public hospital systems to a plant-based default, and they found that they're saving 59 cents per plate, which is over $500,000 of savings every single year from all of the meals that they're serving. So there can definitely be a cost savings conversation and argument to be made for plant-based foods. And when you put it all together, we like to say that you benefit your triple bottom line, right? You're meeting your carbon reduction commitments while saving money. You're meeting your DEI commitments while improving employee health and productivity, because employee retention actually around health-related issues is a huge thing, and companies lose a lot of money every year around people missing work for health reasons or having to hire new employees to retain them, right? And then attracting and retaining talent is the third. So this is our triple bottom line. This argument really, really works. And then I'm just going to give you a couple quick tips to close this out before, I think we only have 5 minutes left. So I don't know if we're going to do another discussion, Dorina, but just some top tips again, when you're speaking about plant-based foods. Avoid boxing people into an identity. Don't say vegan, don't say vegetarian. It really doesn't work. It really creates an us versus them. 75% of the American population is an omnivore. So that means they're already eating plants. We just want to push them to eat more plants, right? But when you call them a vegan or a vegetarian, it makes them feel like they are not part of that, right? Choose your argument that will resonate with your decision maker the most, right? Is it money? Is it health? Is it sustainability? Is it employee retention? Don't frame it as a loss of choice. Meat-free Mondays doesn't work. Meatless. People don't like to be reminded of what they're losing. They want to be reminded of the abundance of things, right? Know your audience. Go slow. These tips and strategies may not work from the get-go, tomorrow by implementing all of them. Go slow. Try one. Try it at an event. Try it for Earth Week. Try it for one step at a time. Know your audience, go slow, and don't push it too fast, because the backlash can be real, and that will end everything. So go really, really slow, and then capitalize on special events like Earth Day is a big one, or Climate Week, those kinds of things. Get buy-in and support from others, with little asterisks that you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen. And then finally, like I said before, is just animal welfare doesn't pull well. People do like to hear about CAFOs being unsafe. Like that actually compels people to action, but in general, animal welfare is just not the right argument to make. And that's everything I have.
Yes. So let's do this. We have 3 minutes left, and let's just stay here in the main session instead of breakout, but do exactly these questions. So who would like to volunteer to just share with all of us? What was like a big breakthrough you learned today? And, do you see any of these ideas play out in your workplace? Like, which arguments would you use? Just talk through it with us. And I see Michael kind of on camera already. So let's just pick you as the first volunteer.
Sure, I already put it in the chat, but like the idea of a plant-based by default RSVP, it's so simple, gives people the option and puts the healthy option forward. And then I'd say, yeah, the idea uh, those health messages. I mean, for me, yes, my I used to have cholesterol that couldn't be measured. It was that high, and was on statins for it, and asked my doctor how long I would have to be taking them because it was making a difference, and he said the rest of your life, and it's like we're gonna try something different, and that's when I went vegan, and I'm like, yeah, it just made a huge difference for me, and I like to share that with people who are considering plant-based.
Great personal health argument story. Yeah.
Who else would like to share? I think Deep.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting session. I especially like the conversation about navigating the organization, right? Like the owner of the cafeteria and the food choices can really vary by industry and by company. So just finding your way through that can be something that it takes a bit of networking or just thoughtful research to get to the right conversation. And Steph, just a question for, I guess, myself and for the rest of the group. Like, at what stage does it make sense to engage Greener by default? Like how far along do you typically want that conversation? Where do you come in? How does it work?
Anytime. I'm here for the entire process. I saw Niti was here. We work very closely with the New York City Office of Food Policy, and they have something called the Plant Power Carbon Challenge in New York. So anyone who signs on to that challenge, we're their implementation partners. So works really well if you have some kind of a commitment from someone, either a reductions emissions goal or just general interest, but it really depends. Like, I'm happy to come do presentations to green teams when there's absolutely no buy-in and get the conversation going, and would love to be brought in if someone is interested in hearing more about how we can implement some of these strategies in the corporate cafeterias.
Very interesting. Thank you.
I'll drop my email into the chat too.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out.
Two things real quickly. All of you who are here will receive a follow-up package with all of these materials and also additional links to case studies. Somebody, Steph, asked in a chat if you could share some of these case studies. So we'll do that absolutely. And one last thing, maybe, this is how we can kind of connect the 2 points from today. If your company already allows guest speakers, then I think you should absolutely invite Greener by default. If guest speakers are not a thing, it might be a little tougher, so then be more gentle with nudging, but I think it was kind of a good point. There's never a wrong time to start this conversation. And you will know if the other person is like pulling back or if they are intrigued. If they are intrigued, just gently suggest, would you be interested in a 15-minute discussion with this expert who actually is doing this kind of work in corporations? But wonderful. Well, it was great to meet with you guys today. Thank you for attending. We will follow up with some materials, and everybody have a nice rest of your day. Thank you very much, Steph.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Ciao.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.